Hello, my students. Before America became a superpower, before skyscrapers, technology, Hollywood, and global influence, America was just an idea born from fear, hope, rebellion, and belief. An idea that ordinary people could challenge kings, rewrite rules, and shape their own future. In this episode, we're going on a journey from fragile colonies struggling to survive to a nation that reshaped the modern world. But this is not just a history lesson. This is a human story, full of courage, mistakes, contradictions, sacrifice, and reinvention. So stay with me all the way till the end, because the final message of this story reveals something powerful. America is not just a country. It's a question the world is still trying to answer. Let's begin. Part 1. When we talk about America today, we often imagine power, influence, technology, money, culture, and a country whose decisions affect the entire world. But the story of America did not begin with power. It began with uncertainty, fear, hope, and survival. Long before skyscrapers, armies, and global influence, America was an idea forming slowly in the minds of people who crossed an ocean searching for something they couldn't find at home. In the early 17th century, the land that would later become the United States was not a nation at all. It was a vast, unknown continent already inhabited by Native American tribes who had lived there for thousands of years, building societies, traditions, and deep connections to the land. Then came European settlers, mainly from England, but also from Spain, France, and the Netherlands. They arrived not as conquerors at first, but as fragile newcomers facing hunger, disease, cold winters, and constant danger. Life in the colonies was brutal. Many did not survive their first year, yet those who stayed carried a powerful belief that this land could offer a new beginning. Some came for religious freedom, escaping persecution in Europe. Others came for economic opportunity, hoping to own land and build a future impossible back home. And while their motivations were different, they all shared the same struggle: survival in a harsh, unfamiliar world. Slowly, settlements grew along the East Coast: Jamestown, Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay. Small communities, isolated, dependent on the land, and often in conflict with native tribes whose lives were being disrupted and destroyed. As years passed, the colonies grew stronger. Farms expanded, trade developed, towns became cities, and with growth came identity. The colonists were still British subjects, but they were no longer the same as the people living in England. Life in the New World changed them. They learned to rely on themselves. They made decisions locally. They developed a sense of independence without fully realizing it yet. Distance from Britain meant freedom in practice, even if loyalty still existed in theory. At the same time, Britain benefited greatly from the colonies. Raw materials flowed to Europe. Taxes were collected. Trade was controlled. For many years, the system worked, or at least it worked for Britain, but everything changed after expensive wars drained the British treasury. Looking for money, the British government began taxing the colonies more heavily. Taxes on paper, tea, stamps, goods. And suddenly, something snapped. The colonists asked a simple but dangerous question: why should we pay taxes to a government that does not represent us? They had no voice in Parliament, no vote, no influence. And yet they were expected to obey laws made thousands of kilometers away. No taxation without representation became more than a slogan. It became a belief, a line that could not be crossed. tension grew slowly, then violently. Protests erupted. British soldiers were sent to maintain control. Incidents like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party were not just political acts, they were emotional explosions. People were no longer afraid to resist. They were discovering something powerful inside themselves, the belief that authority could be challenged. And so what began as disagreement turned into rebellion. By 1776, the idea of independence was no longer unthinkable. It was necessary. Leaders like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington emerged not as kings or nobles, but as ordinary men carrying extraordinary ideas. They believed that power should come from the people, not from birth, that governments existed to serve citizens, not control them. These ideas were radical at the time, dangerous ideas, ideas worth dying for. When the Declaration of Independence was written, it was more than a document. It was a message to the world. It said that people were born equal, that they had natural rights, that they could overthrow a government that failed them. This was revolutionary, not only for America, but for humanity. Of course, the reality was imperfect. Slavery still existed. Women had no rights. Native Americans were excluded completely. But the idea itself was like a spark. And once a spark appears, it cannot be unseen. The war that followed was long, painful, and uncertain. The colonies were weak. Britain was powerful. Victory was not guaranteed. Soldiers lacked food, clothes, weapons. Winters were brutal. Morale collapsed more than once, yet something held them together. Belief. The belief that they were fighting not just for land, but for a future built on choice, freedom, and self-rule. Against all odds, the colonies won. With help from France and the determination of ordinary people, the impossible happened. A group of colonies defeated one of the strongest empires on earth, and when the war ended, a new nation was born, fragile, divided, uncertain, but free. However, independence did not mean stability. The young United States faced enormous challenges. How do you govern such a large land? How do you balance power so no one becomes a king again? How do you unite states with different interests? These questions led to the creation of the Constitution, a bold experiment in democracy. Power was divided, rights were written down, limits were placed on leaders. It wasn't perfect, but it was new, and the world watched closely. America was not yet a superpower. It was an experiment, a risky one. Many believed it would fail, but something unique had been planted, a system built not on tradition, but on ideas. And ideas, once released, are hard to stop. This is where America truly begins, not as a finished nation, but as a work in progress, a country constantly arguing with itself, expanding, struggling, growing, and redefining what freedom really means. And this is only the beginning, because in the next part, we will explore how America expanded west, faced internal contradictions, and moved closer to becoming a powerful nation, while fighting some of its darkest conflicts. Part 2. After independence, America faced a strange and dangerous moment in its history. The war was over, but the future was uncertain. Victory had united the colonies temporarily, yet peace revealed deep differences between them. Each state had its own interests, economy, culture, and fears. Some were built on trade, others on farming. Some depended heavily on slavery, others opposed it. And while the Constitution created a framework for unity, it could not erase these contradictions. America was free, but it was not yet whole. At the same time, a powerful idea was taking hold in the American mind, the idea of expansion. Many Americans believed their destiny was to move west, to explore, to settle, to grow. This belief later became known as manifest destiny, the conviction that the nation was meant to stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. For settlers, this dream meant opportunity, land, and independence. For Native Americans, it meant displacement, broken treaties, and violence. As settlers moved west with wagons and hope, Native tribes were pushed off their ancestral lands, often forced to walk thousands of kilometers in brutal conditions. Entire cultures were destroyed in the name of progress. Yet for many Americans at the time, westward expansion symbolized freedom. Owning land meant independence. A small farmer could build a life without answering to kings or nobles. New towns emerged, railroads expanded, gold discoveries created sudden booms. America began to grow not just in size but in confidence. The frontier shaped the American character, self-reliant, ambitious, restless, always moving forward. But beneath this growth, a deep wound was growing: slavery. From the beginning, America had declared that all men were created equal, yet millions of people were enslaved, treated as property, denied basic human rights. This contradiction sat at the center of the nation's identity. As new states joined the Union, the question became unavoidable: would they allow slavery or not? Every decision threatened to break the fragile balance between North and South. The North was industrializing. Cities were growing. Factories replaced farms. Immigrants arrived from Europe seeking work and safety. The Southern economy, however, depended on plantations and enslaved labor. Cotton became king, and the more profitable slavery became, the harder it was for the South to imagine a future without it. Two different Americas were forming, living under the same flag but moving in opposite directions. Political compromise delayed conflict, but it could not prevent it. Tension increased year after year. Debates grew louder. Families argued. Communities divided. And when Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, many Southern states believed their way of life was under threat. They chose to leave the Union. The country split in two. The Civil War that followed was the bloodiest conflict in American history. Brother fought brother, friend fought friend, cities burned, families were destroyed. Over 600,000 people died. At first, the war was about preserving the Union, but as it continued, it became something more, a moral battle over slavery itself. When Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the war took on a new meaning. Freedom was no longer just a promise in a document, it became a goal paid for with blood. When the war finally ended, the Union survived and slavery was abolished. But victory did not bring peace. The South lay in ruins. The economy collapsed. Millions of newly freed Black Americans faced a hostile world with little protection. Reconstruction attempted to rebuild the nation and integrate former slaves into society, but resistance was strong. Laws were passed to limit Black freedom. Violence became common. The promise of equality was delayed again. Still, despite its pain and contradictions, America continued to change. The late 19th century brought rapid industrial growth. Steel, oil, electricity, and factories transformed the nation. Cities exploded in size. Skyscrapers rose. Wealth accumulated at unprecedented levels. At the same time, poverty grew alongside it. Workers labored long hours in dangerous conditions. Children worked in factories. Immigrants crowded into poor neighborhoods, chasing the dream of a better life. This period created a new image of America, a land of opportunity and inequality existing side by side. Some became incredibly rich, others struggled to survive, and yet people kept coming. From Europe, from Asia, from everywhere. America became a nation of immigrants, each group adding something to its culture, language, food, and identity. By the end of the 19th century, the United States was no longer a fragile experiment. It was becoming a serious power. Its economy was strong, its population was growing, its territory was vast, and its confidence was rising. The country began looking beyond its borders, entering global affairs, influencing other regions, and asserting itself on the world stage. But America's rise was not clean or simple. It was shaped by conflict, injustice, ambition, and belief. Freedom expanded, but not evenly. Power grew, but at a cost. The nation moved forward while carrying unresolved wounds behind it. And yet, one thing remained constant: the belief that the future could be better than the past. That no matter how broken things seemed, progress was possible. That idea, powerful, dangerous, hopeful, became the engine driving America forward. In the next part, we'll see how America stepped onto the global stage, faced world wars, economic collapse, and emerged as a true superpower, shaping the modern world in ways no one could have predicted. Part 3. As the 20th century approached, America found itself standing at the edge of a new role in the world, even if it didn't fully realize it yet. The country was no longer just focused on survival or internal growth. Its factories were producing more than ever, its cities were expanding upward and outward, and its influence was quietly reaching beyond its borders. Still, many Americans believed their nation should stay isolated from global conflicts. They had oceans on both sides, a vast land to manage, and deep internal wounds that were not fully healed. The world, however, had other plans. When World War I erupted in Europe in 1914, America initially watched from a distance. The war felt far away, rooted in old rivalries, empires, and alliances that seemed disconnected from American life. For a while, the United States tried to remain neutral, trading with both sides and focusing on its own prosperity. But neutrality is fragile in a connected world. As American ships were attacked and economic interests were threatened, the idea of staying out became harder to defend. Eventually, America entered the war, not as a dominant force yet, but as a decisive one. The war changed America's self-image. When American soldiers arrived in Europe, they brought fresh energy, resources, and confidence. The conflict ended soon after, and although the United States did not seek territorial expansion, it emerged with a new sense of importance. America had helped shape the outcome of a global war. That realization lingered. Even when the country chose to step back into isolation afterward, something fundamental had shifted. America was no longer just a former colony turned nation. It was becoming a global actor. Then came the 1920s, a decade of speed, music, optimism, and excess. Industry boomed, cars filled the streets, jazz filled the air, people believed progress was unstoppable. The American dream felt alive and reachable. But underneath this excitement, cracks were forming. Wealth was unevenly distributed. Speculation replaced stability. And when the stock market crashed in 1929, the illusion collapsed overnight. The Great Depression that followed was devastating. Banks failed, Businesses closed, millions lost their jobs, families lost their homes, hunger and despair spread across the country. For the first time in decades, Americans questioned whether their system truly worked. It was a moment of deep fear, but also of transformation. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the government took on a new role. Through programs known as the New Deal, the state intervened directly in the economy, providing jobs, support, and hope. It wasn't perfect, but it redefined the relationship between citizens and government. The idea that the state had a responsibility to protect people in times of crisis became part of American life. Just as the nation was beginning to recover, the world was pulled into an even larger catastrophe. World War II erupted in 1939, and once again, America hesitated. Many did not want to repeat the horrors of the previous war, but history forced its hand. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, the illusion of distance disappeared. The war came to America's doorstep, and the response was immediate and total. What followed was one of the most intense mobilizations in history. Factories converted overnight to produce weapons, vehicles, and supplies. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, proving they could do jobs long denied to them. Science and technology advanced rapidly. Entire communities reorganized around the war effort, and when American forces fought in Europe and the Pacific, they did so not just to win battles, but to define a new global order. By the time the war ended in 1945, the world had changed forever. Europe lay in ruins. Traditional empires were weakened or collapsing, and the United States stood almost untouched at home, with an economy stronger than ever and military power unmatched. America didn't just win the war, it emerged as a leader of the free world. The decision to help rebuild Europe through the Marshall Plan further strengthened its influence. America was no longer avoiding global responsibility. It was embracing it. Yet, with power came fear. A new rival emerged, the Soviet Union. Two different visions of the world now faced each other, one built on democracy and capitalism, the other on communism and centralized control. This tension defined the Cold War, a conflict fought not with direct battles between superpowers, but through ideology, influence, espionage, and proxy wars. America became obsessed with security, containment, and dominance. Nuclear weapons created a balance of terror where peace depended on the fear of total destruction. At home, this period brought both prosperity and anxiety. Suburbs expanded, the middle class grew, education became more accessible. At the same time, fear of communism led to suspicion, censorship, and political persecution. America was powerful, but not at ease. It was shaping the world while struggling with its own contradictions. Meanwhile, voices inside the country grew louder, demanding that the promise of freedom be fulfilled for everyone. The civil rights movement challenged segregation, discrimination, and injustice. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. reminded the nation that equality delayed was equality denied. Through protests, courage, and sacrifice, America was forced to confront its unfinished business. Change came slowly, painfully, but it came. Laws were rewritten. Doors opened. The meaning of citizenship expanded. By the late 20th century, America had become something unprecedented. A nation whose culture, economy, military, and ideas reached every corner of the planet. Movies, music, technology, fashion, and language spread worldwide. The American way of life fascinated some and angered others. The country was admired, criticized, copied, and challenged, often at the same time. And yet, through wars, crises, and transformation, one idea continued to drive America forward: the belief that tomorrow could be different from today, that reinvention was possible, that failure was not the end, that history was not destiny. In the next part, we'll explore modern America, its cultural power, its influence, its internal struggles, and the questions that now define its future as a superpower in a rapidly changing world. Part 4. As America moved deeper into the late 20th century and into the new millennium, its power was no longer something to be proven. It was something to be managed. The United States had become a global superpower not only because of its military strength, but because of its cultural influence, its economic reach, and its ability to shape how the world thought, dreamed, and communicated. Yet with that power came a new kind of challenge. The challenge of living up to the image America had created for itself and for others. Culturally, America became impossible to ignore. Hollywood films reached every corner of the planet, shaping how people imagined love, success, heroism, and freedom. American music, jazz, rock, hip-hop, pop, crossed borders effortlessly, becoming the soundtrack of entire generations. American brands filled streets from Tokyo to Lagos. English, shaped by American media, became the global language of business, technology, and the internet. In many ways, America didn't need to conquer territory anymore. Its ideas traveled faster than armies ever could. At the same time, technology accelerated America's influence even more. Silicon Valley transformed how humans communicate, work, and think. Computers became personal. The internet connected the world. Social media changed how people express identity, power, and emotion. American companies didn't just create tools, they created platforms that reshaped daily life. Information became instant. Attention became currency, and America found itself at the center of a digital revolution that it helped create but could not fully control. Economically, America continued to lead, but the landscape grew more complex. Globalization brought opportunity and competition. Factories moved overseas. Jobs disappeared in some regions and appeared in others. Wealth increased, but inequality grew alongside it. For many Americans, the dream still felt real. For others, it felt distant. Cities like New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles became symbols of innovation and success, while other areas struggled with decline, unemployment, and forgotten promises. Two Americas seemed to exist at the same time, one connected to the global future, the other left behind by it. Politically, the world also changed. The Cold War ended, and with it came a moment of optimism. Democracy seemed victorious. Many believed history itself was moving toward freedom and cooperation. But that optimism didn't last forever. New threats emerged: terrorism, cyber warfare, economic instability. The attacks of September 11, 2001 shattered America's sense of security. For the first time in generations, the country felt vulnerable at home. Fear returned, and with fear came war, surveillance, and deep national debate. America entered long conflicts in the Middle East, seeking security but often finding complexity instead. These wars reshaped foreign policy, drained resources, and divided public opinion. Some believed America was defending freedom. Others believed it was trapped in endless conflict. Trust in institutions weakened. Questions grew louder. What is America's role in the world? How much power is too much? And who pays the price? Inside the country, social change continued to challenge old structures. Movements demanding equality, justice, and recognition gained strength. Voices once ignored demanded to be heard. Conversations about race, gender, identity, and belonging became central to national life. These debates were often painful, emotional, and divisive, but they reflected something deeply American: the constant struggle to redefine freedom. America has never been a finished idea. It has always been a debate, a negotiation between ideals and reality. At the same time, immigration continued to shape the nation. People arrived from every continent, carrying languages, traditions, and dreams. Some were welcomed, others faced resistance. The question of who belongs in America became one of the most powerful and emotional discussions of the modern era. Yet history showed a clear pattern. Every wave of immigrants that once faced rejection eventually became part of the American story. The nation changed because of them, not despite them. Meanwhile, the world itself became more interconnected. America was no longer the only center of power. Other nations rose economically and politically. Competition increased, influence became shared, and for the first time in decades, America had to adjust to a world where dominance was no longer guaranteed. This required humility, cooperation, and adaptation, qualities that are harder to maintain than strength. Still, even as its power faced limits, America's ability to reinvent itself remained remarkable. Crises forced innovation. Economic collapse led to new industries. Social movements reshaped laws and attitudes. Technology opened new paths. Each generation questioned the one before it, pushing the nation forward in unpredictable ways. This constant reinvention, sometimes chaotic, sometimes inspiring, became America's true strength. And yet, uncertainty defined the era. Trust in media declined. Politics became polarized. People disagreed not only on solutions, but on basic truths. Social media amplified conflict. Anger traveled faster than understanding. Many wondered whether America could still serve as a unifying force in a divided world when it struggled to unify itself. But beneath the noise, something familiar remained: the belief that change is possible, that mistakes can be corrected, that the future is not fixed. This belief has carried America through revolutions, wars, depressions, and transformations. It is fragile, often tested, but never fully erased. As America stands in the modern world, powerful, influential, questioned, admired, criticized, it faces a defining choice: to cling to past versions of itself or to evolve once again, to lead through force or through example, to fear change or to shape it. And this brings us to the final part of the story. Because understanding America is not just about looking at its past or measuring its power. It's about asking what kind of future it chooses to build for itself and for the world. In the next and final part, we'll reflect on what America truly represents, why its story matters globally, and how its unfinished journey continues to influence humanity. Part 5. When you look at America today, it's easy to focus on the noise, the arguments, the contradictions, the headlines, the conflicts. But to truly understand America, you have to step back and see it not as a finished nation, but as a living story. A story that never stops rewriting itself. Because America was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be possible to change, possible to argue, possible to fall and rise again. From the very beginning, America was built on an idea more than a place. The idea that people could shape their own destiny, that power could come from ordinary citizens, that the future didn't have to repeat the past. This idea has been tested again and again. By slavery, by civil war, by inequality, by economic collapse, by war, by fear, by division. And every time, America stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between its ideals and its comfort. Sometimes it chose wrong. Sometimes it moved slowly. Sometimes it resisted change. But what makes America unique is not that it avoids failure. It's that failure becomes part of the conversation. Mistakes are argued about openly. Injustices are challenged loudly. Progress often arrives through conflict, protest, and discomfort. America grows not because it is calm, but because it is restless. This restlessness is at the heart of the American character. It's why people questioned kings. It's why settlers moved west. It's why workers demanded rights. It's why civil rights leaders marched. It's why immigrants continue to arrive, believing that even an imperfect system can still offer possibility. America attracts dreamers not because it guarantees success, but because it allows the attempt. And that is why the American story matters far beyond its borders. When America changes, the world feels it. When America invents, the world adopts. When America fails, the world reacts. Its culture, language, technology, and ideas move across the planet at incredible speed. Sometimes this influence inspires, sometimes it frustrates, sometimes it divides, but it is always felt. The future of America now depends less on its strength and more on its wisdom. In a world facing climate change, technological disruption, global inequality, and cultural tension, power alone is no longer enough. Leadership requires responsibility, influence requires humility, and progress requires listening as much as acting. America's greatest challenge today is not an external enemy. It is internal fragmentation. Different visions of what the country should be compete loudly. Fear and nostalgia pull against innovation and change. The question is no longer whether America is strong, but whether it can remain united enough to move forward together. History shows that unity does not come from silence or agreement, but from shared commitment to principles that allow disagreement without destruction. And those principles still exist. Freedom of expression, the rule of law, the belief that no leader is above the system, the belief that citizens have the right and the responsibility to participate. These ideas are messy in practice, but powerful in meaning. They are the foundation that allowed America to survive moments that should have destroyed it. The story of America is also a reminder that progress is never final. Rights once gained can be challenged. Equality once promised can be delayed. Democracy itself must be protected, questioned, and renewed constantly. America's future depends on whether its people remember that freedom is not something inherited forever. It is something maintained every generation. Yet despite all the uncertainty, something remarkable remains. People still believe in the American idea, not because it is flawless, but because it is flexible, because it allows reinvention, because it leaves room for correction, because it doesn't demand perfection, only participation. That is why America continues to produce innovators, artists, thinkers, activists, and dreamers. That is why people still argue so passionately about its direction. Indifference would be far more dangerous than conflict. Debate means people still care. and caring means the story is still alive. In the end, America is not defined by its military bases, its corporations, or its political power. It is defined by the tension between what it is and what it claims to be. That tension is uncomfortable, but it is also creative. It forces reflection. It demands growth. It keeps the nation moving. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of the American story. A country, like a person, is not measured only by its success, but by its willingness to confront its failures, by its ability to learn, by its courage to evolve. America began as a fragile group of colonies daring to imagine self-rule. It became a nation through struggle. It became a superpower through sacrifice, innovation, and conflict. And now it stands at another turning point, not ending, but continuing. Because the story of America was never about reaching a final destination. It was about the journey itself, and that journey is still being written. My students, now you've walked through the long journey of America from uncertain beginnings to global power. You've seen that America was never perfect, it was never simple, and it was never finished. It grew through struggle, it changed through conflict, and it survived by questioning itself. America's true power was never only in its armies or its economy, but in its ability to imagine a future different from the past. If you stayed with this story till the end, and I know you did, you now understand something essential. America is not defined by what it has achieved, but by what it continues to search for: freedom, opportunity, meaning, progress. Thank you for listening to Flexlish English, where we don't just learn English, we learn history, ideas, and the stories that shape our world. And remember, the story of America isn't over. Like all powerful stories, it's still being written.